We all probably grapple with it at some point, don't we? That big question,
Right.
what comes after life?
Definitely. It's fundamental.
And, beyond the religious explanations or maybe just wishful thinking, is there a way to think about death, our fate, using just philosophy?
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at a really thought-provoking argument that suggests the oblivion many people fear.
Yeah.
It might actually be based on a misunderstanding.
Okay, so a philosophical take on immortality almost.
In a way, yes. Our deep dive centers on the framework laid out by Thomas Clark in his essay, Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity. We got interested because one of our listeners shared some clips from a YouTube discussion looking at Clark's, well, let's say, unconventional perspective on what happens when we die.
Right, unconventional is probably a good word. And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to really unpack the core of what Clark is arguing.
Yeah, follow the logic.
Exactly. See how it unfolds and try to grasp the implications, which are, well, they're pretty surprising, aren't they? For how we think about death, about our own existence.
They really are. We're aiming for those sort of aha moments,
Yeah.
without getting totally lost in abstract philosophical speak.
Hopefully. So where do we start? Maybe with the common view Clark is arguing against.
I think that's crucial. We need to address the really common assumption, especially in secular thinking. The idea that death means you just descend into nothingness.
Like a void, a big blank.
Precisely. People often imagine this state of non-being that you enter after life stops.
Okay, let's dig into that idea. Death as nothingness. It feels intuitive somehow. Life stops, so nothing remains.
It seems straightforward on the surface. But Clark, actually echoing the ancient philosopher Epicurus quite a bit here, he really challenges this whole picture.
Epicurus. Death is nothing to us, that one.
That's the one. Clark builds on that.
Yeah.
He points out the logical problem, the incongruity of fearing something you can't actually experience while you exist.
Because when we're alive, death isn't here for us.
Right. And when death is here, well, we aren't around anymore to experience it. So Clark asks, in what sense can death possibly be a state we enter into, or something we should fear experientially?
So trying to imagine being in nothingness, it's like a category error, a mental trap.
That's a great way to put it.
Hmm.
It's like trying to picture a room with no properties, including the property of being a room. The act of trying to picture it gives it properties it can't have. Clark calls this reifying nothing. We treat nothing in absence as if it's something, like a place, an empty void that we get plunged into.
Right, like you imagine yourself floating in blackness forever. It's a powerful image, certainly.
Extremely. But Clark says, logically, it's nonsense. It's that mental image of falling into a void and staying there that he sees as the fundamental mistake in how we usually think about death.
Okay. So if we move past this idea of, let's call it positive nothing, this void we enter, where does Clark take us instead? This is where his concept of personal subjective continuity comes in, right?
It does, yeah. That's absolutely central. Personal subjective continuity. It basically refers to that unbroken stream of awareness, of consciousness, that defines our experience of being alive.
Think about it, right? We spend maybe a third of our lives asleep, totally unconscious. Or maybe you've had anesthesia.
Big gaps in objective time.
But when you wake up, your subjective experience, that feeling of being you, it just picks right back up seamlessly.
Exactly. Those periods of unconsciousness, they just don't exist for you from your perspective. There's no experiential memory of the gap itself.
That's a really key point. From our own viewpoint, life feels continuous, like an unbroken flow of awareness, even with those objective breaks.
Right. Clark emphasizes that as conscious beings, we are always sort of present within this bracketed time from birth until death. And it's this inherent feeling of continuity that he uses to challenge the idea that death is the absolute end of all possible experience.
Okay, so we have this continuous subjective feeling through life, even with gaps that we don't experience. How does this connect to, well, to consciousness potentially continuing after death? This is where that life pause thought experiment comes in, which I found really fascinating.
The life pause experiment, yeah. It's a clever tool Clark uses to illustrate exactly this point. So imagine some future tech, right? It can pause your consciousness completely.
Okay, like suspended animation for the mind.
Sort of. And while you're paused, they can do major work. Change your body, your mind, memories, personality, whatever. We start with someone, let's call him Alex Classic. He opts for this procedure.
Right. Alex Classic goes into life pause, and then we get a couple of scenarios. First one is Alex 2.0.
Yep. In this case, the changes are, let's say, moderate. Maybe his personality is tweaked slightly. He suddenly likes different music. Maybe prefers tea over coffee now.
Okay, so Alex 2.0 wakes up. What's his experience?
Crucially, his subjective experience feels totally continuous. It's still him waking up, just slightly different, like no time passed experientially, no gap was felt.
Right, so the takeaway there is that subjective continuity seems to hold even with, like, minor objective changes to who Alex is.
Precisely. Objectively, he's altered. Subjectively, no break. The I feeling flows smoothly from Alex Classic to Alex 2.0.
Okay, that makes sense. But then there's the second scenario, Alex Reborn, and this is where it gets really weird.
It does. Because here, the changes during life pause are radical. Totally different personality, new memories, maybe even a completely different physical appearance.
Yeah.
Objectively, Alex Reborn is almost unrecognizable compared to Alex Classic.
So what happens when Alex Reborn wakes up? Does he feel a break, a sense of being someone new?
That's the kicker. No. According to Clark's logic here, even from Alex Reborn's perspective, the feeling of continuous existence persists. There's no subjective gap experience between being Alex Classic and waking up as this drastically altered Alex Reborn.
Wow.
He still feels like he has always existed, right up to that moment of waking. It suggests that even profound objective changes might not break that underlying subjective flow.
That is really counterintuitive, because everything we think of as defining us, memories, personality, has changed. Yet the feeling of being you remains unbroken.
That's the argument. Now, the thought experiment takes its final, crucial turn. Instead of life pause, imagine Alex Classic just dies. Maybe a car accident, natural causes, whatever. His existence ceases.
Okay. Standard end of life.
Then sometime later, could be minutes, could be millennia, doesn't matter. Completely unconnected to Alex Classic, a new consciousness arises somewhere in the universe. Let's call this one Alex Renewed.
A totally separate being, no causal link at all to Alex Classic.
Exactly. And this is the absolute core of Clark's argument. He proposes that from a purely subjective standpoint, there is no fundamental experiential difference between the transition from Alex Classic dying and Alex Renewed coming into existence.
Wait.
And the transitions within the life pause scenarios, like from Classic to 2.0 or Classic to Reborn.
How can the emergence of a totally new person, Alex Renewed, be subjectively the same as Alex Classic waking up slightly changed? There's no physical connection, no memory transfer.
That is the profoundly counterintuitive point Clark is making. Subjective experience, he argues, this feeling of I am, doesn't necessarily depend on a continuous, causally linked physical thing like a specific brain or a consistent set of memories. Think about waking up from a truly dreamless sleep. The you that wakes up has no conscious memory or experience of the exact moment of falling asleep or the hours spent unconscious.
Right, you just are awake again.
Clark argues the emergence of any new consciousness, like Alex Renewed, is subjectively like that. It's simply a continuation of the stream of awareness. There's no experiential gap of nothingness for the subject who emerges.
So the focus shifts away from the survival of my specific personality and memories and towards the survival or continuation of subjectivity itself, like consciousness as a general phenomenon.
You've got it. We are, in this view, maybe temporary instances or expressions of this underlying capacity for experience. Consciousness itself is what continues.
So Alex Classic, Alex 2.0, Alex Reborn, Alex Renewed, they're all just different points or moments in this larger stream of subjectivity.
That's a good way to phrase it. Clark puts it something like, we simply always are this generic subjectivity wherever and whenever it arises in the universe.
Yeah.
The individual identities are just manifestations. The fundamental thing is consciousness.
That's quite a perspective shift. So death and birth, from this subjective viewpoint, aren't fundamentally different from the life pause transitions, or even just falling asleep and waking up.
Essentially, yes. There's no subjective experience of annihilation at death, just like there's no experience of the gap during sleep. It's merely a change in where and how consciousness is instantiated.
Clark actually has a quote about this, doesn't he? Something about even if awareness stopped for millions of years.
He does. He suggests that even if all conscious awareness in the universe ceased for, say, 1 billion years, and then a new conscious being popped into existence, for that new being, there would be no subjective gap, no experienced interregnum. Subjectivity, he says, would junk that objective gap just as easily as it jumps the gap from our last experience before sleep to the first upon awakening.
So those vast eons of objective time, without any subjects, they're just irrelevant for the subject that eventually comes into being.
Exactly. They don't constitute an experienced state of nothingness for any conscious entity.
So this concept of generic subjectivity is really the linchpin. It's not about me surviving as me with my specific history and personality.
Correct. It's not traditional reincarnation where a specific soul carries memories and karma across lives.
It's more like the capacity for experience itself endures, an impersonal continuity.
Precisely. It's the continuous arising of conscious experience, and your individual life, my life, anyone's life, is just one particular manifestation of this universal phenomenon.
And isn't this similar to what Sam Harris, the neuroscientist, has talked about?
It resonates strongly, yes. Harris has suggested that fundamentally our identity is consciousness. So the birth of any conscious being after your physical death is, in a way, deeply analogous to your own rebirth.
Because as long as consciousness exists somewhere, in some form,
then what you fundamentally are, in this broader sense of being a locus of subjectivity, continues.
Okay. This perspective, I mean, it might offer some comfort against the fear of total oblivion, right? But it also sounds like it comes with some pretty heavy implications.
It absolutely does. Profound ones. If our fundamental identity is rooted in this shared generic subjectivity, well, then the experiences of all conscious beings become, in a way, linked to our own.
How so?
Because if the I that experience is fundamentally the same across different beings, just instantiated differently, then the suffering of another conscious being isn't entirely separate from me as a conscious entity.
Ah, that does shift things. Suddenly, the well-being or the suffering of, well, any creature capable of conscious experience, it takes on a different weight, doesn't it, if we're all expressions of the same underlying thing?
It really does. Clarke himself talks about this leading to certain ethical revelations. It challenges things like retributive punishment, for instance, or speciesism.
Because harming another conscious being is, in a sense, harming the very consciousness that you yourself are an instance of.
That's the idea. Prejudice, discrimination.
Yeah.
They look like cases of mistaken identity from this viewpoint. You're drawing a line around your particular manifestation and treating other manifestations as fundamentally different, when the underlying subjectivity might be shared.
And this ties back to how Clarke describes dying. Not as extinction, but
as a radical refreshment of subjectivity. That's his phrase. It's a transition within this ongoing current of awareness, not the end of the current itself.
So boiling it down, the core takeaway seems to be, from the purely subjective standpoint, there's no life after death because there's no death in the sense of a final end to experience.
Right. Consciousness or subjectivity endures just not necessarily as you, the specific individual with your current memories and personality.
The fear of personal annihilation, then, might just be a misunderstanding of what consciousness actually is and how it persists.
That's certainly the argument Clarke puts forward. A deep misunderstanding of subjective continuity.
Wow. Okay. This has been, well, quite a journey through some seriously complex and fascinating philosophical territory. It definitely forces you to reconsider some really fundamental assumptions.
Yeah.
About life, death, identity, consciousness itself.
It really does. And maybe, to leave you with something further to chew on, consider this question posed by another philosopher thinking along similar lines, Magnus Winding.
Okay.
Ask, why are you the same person when you wake up in the morning as the you who went to sleep the night before?
Seems obvious, right?
Yeah. Memory, physical continuity.
But then he asks, why don't you instead wake up as a scared rabbit in a dark forest in the middle of the night?
Okay.
And his punchline is, well, who says that you don't?
Just think about the implications of that question for how you understand your own identity, your connection to other conscious moments, maybe even across species boundaries, and the nature of reality itself.
Right. It's definitely a compelling thought to mull over. We really hope you, the listener, will continue to reflect on these ideas. How might this perspective, this idea of generic subjectivity, reshape how you see your own place in the world? Your relationship to other conscious beings?
It really does suggest a much deeper level of interconnectedness, doesn't it? And a kind of persistence, maybe, that we don't usually perceive, all bound together by this continuous thread of awareness, which seems to be the very essence of subjective experience.